Okay, how about that? Well, would you believe all kinds of crazy things happening yet again? Alrighty. Well, let's see here. This looks pretty like a pretty low level. We'll try to bring that up a little bit like that. Hopefully, you guys can hear me now. Hardware going crazy again. Just never know what's going to happen. All right. Well, welcome. Thanks for making the jump over from that other stream. Who knows what's going on? Every time I start a YouTube stream these days, it says that there is no. You can't start a stream right now. Your streaming is not available, or it'll start a stream and then come back. It's just the weirdest thing. I don't know what's going on. That's a YouTube thing, and then once I started, then Digital Console failed, and I had to reboot that. It's just nutty. Well, glad to be here. Thanks, Bob and Dawn and Cammy. Who else we got here? We got the whole crew here. Hey, thanks for Sue. Thanks for coming along. So again, probably pretty short today. Just kind of recap what we did last week with Wayne McCroy. And again, he joins us every other week. So those are the full editions. The .5 editions, of course, is just little old me naked. No, really. I just barely got home in time. I was listening along to Jason and Crow 777 as they do their Sunday stream. And I had slipped into a Costco and was barefaced as usual. It's been getting pretty hardcore here in Seattle these days. They, have the full-on mandate now that you wear a mask. But ever since it started, I just walk in and say, hey, I've got a medical exemption. They go, okay, have a good day. The only people that I've really had challenge me are people, who just are walking by and they're just mask holes. And they'll give me the one gal yesterday said she's was it yesterday? That was Thursday. It was the other day. Anyway, I went into Five Guys to pick up an order, and I was just in there for a couple of seconds, and there was a gal in there, and she was in her late 60s, and she just looked like a sourpuss. I couldn't really see her face, of course, because she's wearing a mask, but as I go in there and pick it up, I picked it up and walked out, and she's like, "You should be wearing a mask." And I just looked up and said, "You should lose 50 pounds." I mean, since we're sharing health advice. She just stood there stock straight. I thought the gal behind the counter was going to blow snot out of her nose, really. It was funny. I came home and told my wife, she's like, "Oh my God, I would have paid money to see that." I'm like, I know I should have had it on film. It just happened so fast. Oh my gosh, it was just, yes, I'm a bare-faced rascal. That's right. My wife calls me a polar bear because I'm very, very white and I love to have my back scratched. So I guess as long as I'm not a bipolar bear, I guess I'm fine. All righty. So here we go. So again, just we'll touch a little bit on, kind of recap what we did last week, again with Wayne. We've been going through the book of Genesis and kind of touching on the creation story as recorded in the Bible. And, there's some really interesting stuff in there. We covered the idea that the serpent is described in the original Hebrew as nakash is the word, which could also be kind of described as shining one or even feathered one or serpent. This kind of goes very well hand in hand with like Quetzalcoatl. Well, also with America is also another interesting famed feathered serpent. So very interesting stuff. I was one of these days, we'll get to it. I have been doing a lot of recently going back and touching again on the book of Revelation. I know, scary stuff. Ooh, Mark of the Beast. It's all that crazy stuff. And that's that's what this Sola Scriptura series actually came from, was a set of conversations that Wayne McCroy and I had. And he and I had both, back in the 80s and 90s, of course, separately from one another, had been getting very into what's called eschatology, and that's the study of end times events according to Scripture. And, at one point I came to, I guess, an understanding, if you will, that the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation are intrinsically tied together. They cover many of the same imagery. You have beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, and these things appear over and over. You have the time, half a time, 2, 3.5 year periods that look to be linked together into a full 7.5 year period. Both of them bring that out. Although in the book of Daniel, at the very end, it says, seal up the book, and it only can be understood at the time of the end. And it seemed to me that although at the very end of Revelation, in chapter 22, at the very end, it says, don't seal this up because I'm coming soon. But it seemed to me, and I kind of put it down for a while, because it felt like while they are intrinsically linked and speaking of some of the same imagery, that you couldn't really understand one without the other. And since Daniel was sealed, then wouldn't be able to be understood until it actually happened, and it might be better just to not pull the rest of my hair out, although that happened anyway, so now I'm very bald. But I would probably just kind of put it down. Although more recently, I just kind of been, things have been happening, and so I wasn't really necessarily trying to correlate things that I saw around me. It just picked up interest again, and I read all over the place. And so I had been just kind of going through it again, and I found a couple really interesting things in there that I think I just hadn't seen or put together before. I know I'd seen it, but I just hadn't put it together in a certain way before. And I checked with Wayne. I said, hey, what do you think about this? And he went, oh, man. I went, I know, right? And he said, do you think anybody else would be interested in this? And I was like, well, maybe. I mean, it's kind of off the beaten path a little bit. Neither one of us have been explicitly, again, I always say I'm not very evangelical. I'm not trying to do a Christian stream or anything like that. I don't really, he's much easier with the name than I am. I don't really consider myself a Christian, certainly not a religious person. I did serve as a teaching pastor many years ago, as well as a worship pastor, worship leader, and that sort of stuff. But I haven't darkened the door of a church building in a decade or more. I don't have I don't have as bad a taste in my mouth as I think some people that I interact with. Certainly, like with the Awakening Project and people sending me their stories, there are many people who have had, many people who I've met before who have had a terrible experience with religion and what it brings. And I understand. I have often said that I never got so much healing or as wounding as within the doors of a church. It can be very far away from the teachings of Jesus, and most of religion is, even and perhaps especially within Christianity. It is. There's a lot of traditions of man that get overlaid on top of what it actually says, and you got to just be careful. And I think discernment is the key. But I think also many people who have done research into the truths of this world and understanding that we have been lied to on so many levels by so many, including where we're at and the nature of the place, come to the realization that it is very likely. I mean, the evidence strongly seems to suggest that this is a created realm, and it therefore must be a creator. And it does seem that whatever you think of it from that point, it does seem to be perfection broken, and something bad happened at some point, and it seems like we have an enemy, and we can kind of go along. Many people have misapprehensions, I think, about who and what the creator is, because many stories have been told, just like you get in the media, right? Many stories are told, some of which carry some actual facts or at least accurate details within them, but then the meaning of it is turned upside down. And I think you can expect the same thing from the world when it comes to what and who the creator is and what his intentions are. I've always said that if you want to know, just ask, right? Don't ask me. I can tell you what I think about it, but no reason to trust me. I guess more than anybody else. Everybody's got their ideas, and I would just, again, my encouragement is for you to reach out and ask the Creator to communicate directly to you what is truth, and learn some discernment. It's a still small voice, and it does take some exercise, as I mentioned earlier this morning. It's like any muscle, right? It takes a little bit of exercise to learn what you're, to discern whether you're hearing the echoes of your own ego off the back of your head, or you're hearing a tape playing from your parents or some other person when you were a kid telling you about religion. Here's one, for example. When I was growing up, I grew up within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which I call Baptist Jews. The reason that Seventh-day Adventists don't have sex standing up is because it could lead to dancing. Yeah. Good people, a lot of good people, and they're really serious. And then they also taught me a really great methodology for studying Scripture. But the problem with that is when you really study Scripture, you realize that many of the things that they hold to in terms of their denomination is not biblical. And so I had to kind of dump all that and start over. And so I adopted what is called Sola Scriptura, the Bible and the Bible alone. Just let the Bible interpret itself and see what it has to say. Anyway, one of the things that I was taught, and my wife still thinks this is just like the most horrible thing she's ever heard, is that it was much, there was a lot of legalism, right? Especially during the late 1960s, early 1970s when I was growing up. And there was, for example, not only were they not, no drinking, no smoking, no dancing, but also caffeine was poorly looked upon. They still kind of hold to a very, they're big on the health thing, and so they have a lot of hospitals, but they, no dancing, that's right, absolutely. But again, many very legalistic things. And so, but like, for example, they keep kosher, right? So there's a lot of people who are within that community who are vegetarian, and they have a lot of vegetarian foods that are available. Loma Linda, California, the Loma Linda Hospital is part of the Adventist system. So they're, again, big on medicine, that sort of stuff. They teach, do a lot with that sort of thing. And they've done, some good works. They have a lot of colleges and stuff. But one of the things that I was taught is that movies were bad. And of course, I think that, movies and television were kind of looked down upon. And of course, because of the Sabbath, they kept Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. Again, like I call them Baptist Jews. They kept that as the Sabbath. And so there was no watching TV, no, doing stuff that other kids got to do. So I didn't get to kind of play sports or that sort of stuff growing up. But one of the things was movies, right, were kind of forbidden. And so I didn't go to any movies until I was older. And but we were taught, here's the thing, here's the story, right? Is that your guardian angel wouldn't go in there with you. If you went to a movie theater, the guardian angel would stand outside and weep because he couldn't come in and protect you. You were out of his protection, and so the guilt. And my wife just goes, "Oh my gosh, it's like child abuse. What a terrible thing." And I'm like, yeah, looking back, I just it is a kind of a crazy thing to say, but I believe, I believe it because I was told that, right? And I didn't have any reason to doubt, and all these stories I was told. So even as an adult, it took, sometimes I would have to challenge some of the beliefs that I had and wonder where they came from. And sometimes I would realize that these were things that were dropped on me when I was a kid, and I would have to test everything, right? Everything that I believed. And this is certainly true, not just within the spiritual realm, but again, with history and the shape of the earth and all this kind of stuff, is like I started having to test everything. And I learned during when I became a counselor for a period of time, and I had to kind of go through the process myself to understand it better, that for me, if there was something that would like trigger me, right? Like you get triggered even before that word, kind of became popular. How did the guardian angel know? Well, they would stand outside, right? If you were going into the theater, they would stand. They wouldn't go in there with you because it was an evil place, and they wouldn't follow you in. So they'd stand outside and cry because they couldn't protect you from all the evil that was happening in there. No, really, no, that was the story. But yeah, many of the things that, again, we hold on to as part of our belief system, we have to kind of challenge where did we pick that up? And much of it, I think, comes from when we were kids. And we picked up, stories like the shape of the earth. I mean, I can remember pretty clearly being taught that the ancients were so dumb, right? They looked around, of course it looks, flat and stationary. And they were so dumb that they didn't know any better. And now you know the secret, right? Now you're smart because you know the real truth. It's an optical illusion. It's a trick. And so now you're smart. And so from then on, you defend it because now you know you're smart, right? You're smart because you know that your eyes are playing tricks on you. Your senses you can't trust your senses. So now you got to trust the authority. You got to trust the smart people, right, to tell you what is what. And that stays with you for a long time. And many people never get rid of it. In fact, they don't trust themselves to do the study on their own. And so they can't, they don't trust themselves to look into it because they think the smarter people are smarter than them. They don't want to look dumb, and so they're just going to hang on to those things. It's a pretty I don't know. Pretty interesting stuff. So I would suggest always challenge your beliefs. Oh, I was going to say with the counseling, if you get triggered by something, I always found for me that meant that it wasn't the issue at hand that had triggered me. Right? It was some previous thing that I was going through. It was like some post-traumatic thing. And so anytime that I would get really triggered by something that was much more than the current situation, I could usually go back and trace it back to the original issue. And almost always what I would find is that it was true that, I had to deal with some unhealed thing from the past, right? I had to go back and manage those things. And so that allowed me to take a lot of emotional landmines out of what... out of my life by simply finding those places where I had a really strong emotional reaction to something, and then be able to kind of go back and unwind the history of it. And the same happened with things that, strong beliefs that I felt immediately, I felt like I wanted to defend right away, right? If that happened, then I would have to go, hey, where did I get that, right? And why do I have that impression? Why do I have that misapprehension? And so it was required of me, and I required it of myself, to have to go back and kind of pick these things up and figure out where and how I came to these ideas. And sometimes, it turns out that those ideas were not my own. And let's see, I've done something horrible here. I'm trying to move my screens around so I can see things here. Yes, they want that. I've got one of my screens. We're sitting right on top of the edge between screens, and I cannot. Oh, there we go. Cannot move it around. And I was just about to accidentally close the. Okay, I was about to close the broadcast screen, and I really didn't want to do that because the stream would have ended, and that would have been bad. Okay, all right. So here we are. We're back in business, I think. Okay, pardon me. So, one more question. If the guardian angel was outside during a film crying, could you see the angel? No, this is just a story that was told to me, J. Armstrong. What is true is that perhaps unlike other people, as a very young child, I could sense other presences, if you will, both good and bad, and sometimes so intensely. I mean, it's as if they took up space, and I could see where they should have been, but I couldn't physically see them, but I could tell that they were there. Much as the same way, because I've worked in the audio industry for a long time, and I've trained my ears when I'm mixing or something. If I close my eyes, I can tell certainly where somebody in a room is standing because they absorb sound. And similarly, I can tell. I think it's a pretty good metaphor. I can tell where one of those things would be by the space that they take, even if they're not visible, even if even if they're not in our same realm. I don't know why I'm telling you this is stuff I normally don't talk about, but yes, it was just a story I was told, J. Armstrong, that the guardian angel, that's what would happen. The guardian angel wouldn't go in; they couldn't protect you if you went into the bad movie theater. So it was just a story that was told. But I never did. Not believe in the supernatural because I experienced it, and I learned very early on not to speak of it because you would get in trouble. I did learn that, right? Not to talk about it, and to keep your mouth shut about those kinds of things. But So anyway, there's that. So other questions? I'm willing to take questions today. This is pretty much just kind of what we're doing here. Is spend a little time together. I'll answer any questions that I can and scroll back up in the chat, see if I'm missing anything. Yes, Sue Finelli was actually very much first in the first stream. So Globebusters, Bob is always first in our hearts. So we've got that going. So how's that house closing thing? Bob and Cammy, is that working out for you? Let's see. Somebody's cooking curry. Oh my, I love curry. Curry in a hurry. It's good stuff. Let's see here. I'm just kind of flipping through the chat here. The more I learn from the world, the more, John Smiley says, the more I learn from this world, the more I understand the Amish and the Mennonites and Puritans. Yeah. I mean, what's funny is that these days, these days the word fundamentalist is considered an epithet, right? And you'll hear that, for example, on one of the streams, flat Earth debate. He uses the word fundy, right? And here's the thing: is again, that's one of those things where you get semantic drift. Fundamentalist now is a kind of a bad word. You're a dumb, I don't know. But keep in mind, again, with the etymology, it's just the fundamentals. If you're playing football or if you're playing a sport, the things you need to learn is the fundamentals. You go to the very basics, the very foundational stuff, and do that. Anything else, right, you're getting out into the weird stuff. So I don't think fundamentalism is necessarily a bad thing. It's radicalism, right? That's the weird thing. And so... there's that. Let's see. We had a question here. Thoughts on rapture theology? Oh boy, I'm going to get some people upset with me on that. So I don't know. So I guess let me break down and say the word theology. So I don't necessarily get much into theology or apologetics in terms of holding to it as the traditions of man. Like there's a kid that I work with, and he's very much into a type of theology. He's considered himself a man of the cloth. He belongs to an Orthodox church, and he's training to become whatever it is, a priest or whatever it is they do. It's kind of like a Catholic light, but not exactly. And he's really held to these traditions of man. And again, he holds to those over the Scripture. And he goes, well, the ancient fathers tell us this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what? But does that... You find that in Scripture. Like, what's your authority for that? Well, these people, okay, those are men. Are men flawed? Right? Well, do they always tell you the truth? And he gets really upset about that. It's like, well, you got to hold on to something. And I do. I hold on to my relationship with Dad. That's all I got. And to me, I infer and really interpret all of Scripture through the relationship that I have with Dad. And there's some things that I think is easier to tell that have been perhaps messed with a little bit, and other things that are just even the person writing it might have had a misunderstanding about what the intentions of Dad were in that moment. So anyway, so when it comes to rapture theology, well, here's the thing: the word rapture doesn't appear anywhere in Scripture. That's pretty easy to verify. I can explain some of it, right, with dispensationalism, and there are different versions of this and how it goes. You have the 70 weeks prophecy in the book of Daniel 7, and the idea there's this split time thing. I don't know. Here's one thing I say that's very difficult to tell, is because from my perspective, the history that we're given is so convoluted and messed up. I don't think you could do the math the way it's shown against what we've been given, which is wrong, and then make any sense of it, right? So I think you would have to have a better understanding of what I think the prophecy going from the time it was given up until the time of Christ probably works, because it was probably consistent through that period. And once we get past that and we get into kind of what we would call modern history or AD, I don't even know what to make of it. I think the work of Anatoly Fomenko certainly indicates that at a minimum 300 years, maybe 1,000 years is off there. I mean, certainly we know even the Catholic Church admits to 13 years, right? That they threw away in trying to make their calendar work out. So there's that, right? So even that messes things up, and then we're looking at everybody went apeshit crazy over the Mayan calendar. Again, it's hard to tell, right? I think that there probably was something to it, but where are we at now? Hard to say. And I think that's by intention, right? That we have been misled and misguided, so that it would be difficult to tell. All right, so get back to this idea of rapture theology. One of the things that does appear is what's called the Great Tribulation. Jesus spoke about this, a time of tribulation, a time of trouble, such that no one had ever seen before, no one has ever seen prior, or will be again since. And in fact, if it weren't shortened, that no one would survive, even the elect. That's the words of Jesus. And there are both again, in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, it is spoken, there is a very specific time period set of 7 years, and then that it seems to be split in, split between 3.5 and 3.5. And so there are people who believe in what's called a pre-tribulation rapture, that is, at the beginning or before the tribulation, or the time of Jacob's trouble is sometimes how it's referred to. That those who are the elect, or whatever, some people refer to this, the Revelation 7, the 144,000 there. It's enumerated that 12,000 from each of the tribes would be sealed, the seal of God in their forehead, which probably almost certainly is a kind of a metaphor. I don't think they actually have a thing on their forehead. But who knows? I mean, I reserve the right to be wrong, always. But who knows? But the Jehovah's Witnesses, they think only 144,000 in all of history will have been saved. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty crappy lotto ticket. I mean, so I don't know if I'm going to go with that. But again, the idea that the pre-tribulation rapture would be that you would be drawn up into the sky. Jesus would come and take you away from all this. God, take me away. And you wouldn't have to endure any of it. That seems to be largely contrary to what Scripture says for a couple of reasons. I don't know if you want me to get into that now. Okay, let's see if I can. I mean, I hadn't intended to go to this yet, but let me point a couple of things out here, and I'll just show you what. I'll give you an idea where I'm coming from on this. You have on your heart, forehead with a matching one on your hip. I don't know if that is. Oh. Okay, so let me start. What is it? Revelation? Is it Revelation 5? I'll have to kind of figure this out here as I go along. So where are we at here? This. Okay, so I'll try to give you an idea here. So the first three chapters of Revelation it kind of opens up, and there's a message for each of the churches, the 7 churches in Europe and Asia, and there's a couple of things that happen here, and I want to just point these out. And this is part of what I had shown to Wayne. So there is so in Revelation 5 here. Did you jump the shark? I don't even know. I'm not watching chat anymore. 7-year cycle, part of the resetting the 364-day calendar. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that appears there. So I guess what I'm going to focus on is the the idea of the 7-year time of tribulation being broken into 2 3.5-year sections. And I'll give you kind of the idea of where I'm looking at it right now. Again, I reserve the right to be completely wrong. This is just how I'm seeing it. So in Revelation 5, so basically Revelation 4, after the message to each of the churches, it says, after these things I looked, and I saw a door open in heaven, and I saw, this is what I saw, a throne, right, with the Ancient of Days on it. Around the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats 24 elders, the ancient sitting, clothed in white garments, on their heads crowns of gold. And then there was the 7 spirits of God, and then he sees the Lamb. This is the Lamb that appears to be slain. That would be Jesus. Then the 4 and 20 ancients fell down before him that sitteth on the throne, and adored him that liveth forever and ever, and cast their crowns before him. That's where you get the band casting crowns. So then in the beginning of chapter 5, I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within and without, and in some this says a scroll, right, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and to loose these seals. And nobody, this is really interesting for those of, again, looking at the nature of the earth, no man was able, either in heaven, nor on earth, nor under the earth. And there's several places that mentions that in the book of Revelation, that people on the earth, in heaven, on the earth, or under the earth. So apparently that is a real, place. But nobody was worthy to open the book or even look at it. And I wept much because nobody was found worthy to open the book or see it. And one of the ancients said to me, don't weep, weep not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals. And so he comes and he grabs it, and he's going to open these 7 seals. And so some stuff that happens there. I'm trying to get to the salient parts here. And so this is the first 4 seals begin the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? That's where that comes. You've got the first, Revelation 6 is the first opening of the first four seals, and each of the first four seals is one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. And so Wayne does a good job. Wayne McCroy, he's got a thing on his channel, A Chemical Tech Revolution. He's got some ideas about that. I think they're interesting. I don't know if he's hitting it out of the park or if he's close. It's interesting. He's looking at it a way that some other people haven't. And I haven't spent a lot of time on this, but basically you got the white horse who has a bow, and he's given a crown, and he goes forth conquering that he might conquer. And most of the versions or translations kind of say it that way. He went for conquering and to conquer with the intention to conquer. He does that. The second horseman is red, and he takes peace from the earth, and people should kill one another. And a great sword was given to him. So that's the red horse. Then we have a black horse with a pair of scales, and he said, basically 2 pounds of wheat for a penny, and some of them it translates it for a denarius, and some of the places it says for a day's wages, and then thrice 2 pounds, so 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, whatever. And see thou not hurt the oil and the wine. Other places it says olive oil. Some places says all the olive oil that you want, and wine. There is, again, a number of different ways of looking at this. I'm not certain about them. Again, Wayne's got some interesting ideas. Basically, his view is that things are going to get very expensive. It'll be hard to get food, but those who are in power, who have wine, right, and oil, olive oil, they have plenty. Okay, I can see that. When he opened the fourth seal, then this is the pale horse, and death and hell followed him. And he had power over the 4 parts of the earth. And some of them say a fourth of the earth, right? So it's interesting how, again, translations can be funny there. But over the 4 parts of the earth, to kill with the sword, with famine, and with death. And that often is with disease, is what that with death often is translated. And with beast of the earth. So, bad things. And when he opened the 5th seal, this is the part that I'm trying to get to, right? When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. Note in the book of Enoch, if you're familiar with that there Enoch describes 3 mountains, and basically open places within these mountains, or within the pit, down on the earth. So he's got basically the place where people are the dead, the spirits of the dead. And you've got one that was hell, and one that is like paradise, right, or Valhalla, where they're resting. One is hell, where they're kind of tortured, and one is specifically for martyrs. That's the way Enoch describes it. But I note here, we pick this up again, and of course Jesus even describes Lazarus and the rich man. That Lazarus is a beggar, and he had sores on him, and the rich man used to go by him every day and sometimes give him money, but mostly not. He would mock him, and then they both died. And then as they were both it says the rich man was being tortured, and so he looks up and sees Lazarus and said, "Hey, can you dip your finger in some water and give me some water?" And there was a gulf set between them so that they couldn't contact each other, but he could see him at one point. And then he says, "Hey, could you go back and tell my brothers so that they won't make the same mistake?" Basically, so kind of like the Christmas Carol, right? Go back and tell them so they don't make the same mistake. And said, you can't do that, because even if even if you were to do that, they wouldn't believe you. You had your chance. So anyway, I'm just saying that in the word Jesus describes a similar thing. So I'm just kind of getting back here. So here we have in Revelation 6, and this is verse starting 8 or 9 here. Let me come back over here. I just found this very interesting, and I'm going to tie this together with some other stuff. So it says, he opened the 5th seal. He saw under the altar the souls of those who were slain for the word of God and had the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, does you not judge and revenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth?" And white robes were given to every one of them. And it was said to them, here's the point, that they should rest a little while longer till their fellow servants and their brethren which were to be slain, even as they should be filled up. Let me change versions here. I'll find another version, because I want to point out the way that this is said, that So you should rest quietly a little while longer until the number of your fellow servants and brethren and sisters who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed. That the number would be full. That there is a number that has to be gotten to. That's okay. So we'll take a look at that. All right. Let's move forward then. Revelation 7 deals with the 144,000, as I mentioned before, but there's a multitude from the tribulation, so that knocks out the idea that it's only 144,000. So sorry to Jehovah's Witnesses if you read the whole chapter. Right here we got 144,000 that are sealed from each tribes, but it said, after these things I looked, and I saw a vast multitude which no one could count, gathered from every nation and all the tribes and peoples and languages of the earth, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, Christ, dressed in white robes, palm branches, and saying, salvation to God. And it said, one of the elders responded and said, who are these? And he goes, well, I don't know. And he said, these are the people who came out of the great tribulation, and they have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb because of the atoning sacrifice. For this reason, they're standing before the throne of God, and they'll serve him, right? So they'll hunger no more thirst. The sun won't beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. He'll wipe away all their tears, right? So apparently, right, sorry for you Jehovah's Witnesses, but it's not 144,000, because it immediately says that there is a number so much that no one can count. And not just from all of history, but these are the ones who went through that specific tribulation. So got to be the last. So anyway, you got to just read what it says. And again, my take on how I read this is it generally is literal, unless it tells you otherwise. Like it will say, this represents that, this represents that. All right, so then Revelation 8, you got the seventh seal, the trumpets, right? So, okay, now check this out. And then, so those are the five seals. The sixth seal, let me go back here. So he opens up the sixth seal, and then there's an earthquake and stars fall, and darkness there comes darkness, and the moon turns to blood. And so we could look at that with some of the idea of that we have had eclipses and blood moons. Who knows? That's not really germane to what I want to get to. The question had to do with rapture theology, and so I want to get to this idea that people are going to escape this, because I think if that's what they're looking for, they're going to be very sadly mistaken. And if it doesn't happen the way they believe, right, then they're going to be in trouble, because they'll just throw it all away, right? So anyway, get to this. So after this, when the seventh seal is broken open, there's silence in heaven for about half an hour in awe of God's impending judgment. Then the seven angels who stand before God, and the seven trumpets were given to them. And then another angel came and stood at the altar, and he had a golden censer with much incense was given to him, so he might add it to the prayers of the saints. And on the golden altar in front of this throne, and the smoke and the fragrant aroma of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and hurled it into the earth. And there were peals of thunder and loud rumblings and sound and flashes of lightning and earthquake. All right, so we've got now seven trumpets that are going to sound. Okay, so early, and I would say probably the late 80s, early 90s, the way I was reading this was very consistent with an idea of there being an asteroid impact, because what comes with the first four trumpets. Now we see in the news all the time, they're pushing this idea of there being an asteroid strike. And in fact, in the book of Daniel 2, chapter 2, the image of, there's an image that's represented by different kingdoms. And the last kingdom is iron and clay that don't mix together. And that's a whole nother study, another talk there. But it is, there is a huge rock that is cast without hands and comes and hits it at the feet and shatters the whole thing. And then it shatters it into basically just dirt, right? Turns it into nothing. And then the rock turns into a huge mountain that fills up all the earth. Very interesting. And then we get here's the first four trumpets. So the first angel sounded his trumpet, and there was a storm of hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled to the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass, right? So that would be like the little bits and pieces of the asteroid, right, breaking up and coming in first. And then the second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a great mountain blazing with fire. It says, a great mountain all ablaze was casted, hurled into the sea, and a third of the sea was turned to blood. And I saw that as being, red tide. It's deoxidation of the water. And a third of the living creatures that were in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed, which again would be consistent with the idea of there being an asteroid impact in the ocean. The third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, flashing across the sky, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of the fresh waters. The name of the star is Wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the waters because they had become bitter. Again, back in the day, what I thought this might be was, again, from the impact, that it would break the water table, and that it would damage the water supply, and many people would get sick. Again, at this point, I have to back up because I know that it's not going to be an asteroid the way it's described. Now, there might be a big rock cast without hands, and they're going to describe it as that. There might be a judgment from God. Who fucking, I don't know. But this is what it describes. And certainly, the media is trying to tell us that they went from, in my lifetime, that an asteroid had never hit the Earth until the late 70s, early 1980s. They had found this asteroid impact in the Yucatan Peninsula, and that was the one that took out the dinosaurs. And then they had these other ones, and then all of a sudden they were everywhere. Oh yeah, there's lots of evidence of it. And then now it's like, oh, it's not just possible, but it's inevitable, right? So. Yeah, you know what? Maybe. So need to connect. There is an idea that this stuff has already happened, and that they're lying to us, and that this could have already, some of this stuff already occurred, and that could be what the mud flood is. I don't know. I don't. Well, I'll give you. So yeah, I'll get more into. That's not what I really want to cover here. I mean, I'm just kind of breaking this stuff down because that's how I read it before. But there are some specific points I want to get to talk about the specific. How old am I? In my mid 50s. But I want to get to the idea of this. Well, I want to get to the specific thing, and so these are kind of secondary and tertiary to that, but it is very interesting. So you got the third angel sounded, that's the wormwood. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and the third of the sun, a third of the moon, and the third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be darkened, and the third of the daylight wouldn't shine, and the night the same way would not shine. And so at this point, again, I looked at this and thought, well, that's all indicative of an asteroid impact, right? You would have sort of what they called nuclear winter, right? Or you'd have all the stuff that was cast up into the air. You would have all this stuff is consistent, right? So great mountain burning with fire thrown into the sea. All that seems to be fairly consistent with what would be described to the masses, certainly, as an asteroid impact. Whatever it is, I don't know. Could it even be Project Blue Book? Maybe, right? Again, I don't know, but I'm saying this is what it describes, and it seems consistent with the idea of being described as an asteroid impact, whether or not, what it actually is. Again, given what I think the Earth is, I don't think that's consistent with, we're not floating in space. All right, so we have here in Revelation 9, the fifth trumpet is I saw a star, which is actually described also as an angelic being, so not just a star, but here's another idea of the stars being sentient. I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth, but angelic being, they specifically say that. So this further, along with the Book of Enoch, tells me that it's very consistent, that... Again, the idea that the luminaries probably are, in my opinion, are sentient beings, as well as electromagnetic phenomena. I'll go with that too. So maybe do it both. But I think most things, and Cammy and I even talked that rocks are probably sentient in some way that we just don't understand. Certainly trees and plants are. Certainly we can see animals are. And we've been told, all the 17th and 18th and 19th century materials told us that animals, were just acting on instinct. They didn't even think. They didn't have personalities. They were, they even thought they didn't feel pain. Come on, man. It's like, what? Anybody who's observant can see better than that. So, all right. So then we've got this angel that falls, and he's given the key to the bottomless pit, and then smoke comes out of the bottomless pit like a smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the atmosphere were darkened by the smoke from the pit, and out of it came locusts upon the earth, with power to hurt was given them. The interesting part here is that the description of them, they were not permitted to kill anyone, but to torment and cause them extreme pain for 5 months. And their torment was like that of a scorpion when it stings a man. In those days, people will seek death and they'll not find it, and they'll long to die, but discover that death flies from them. It evades them. That's another interesting conversation that Wayne and I have had about specifically transhumanism, but that's a different topic. I don't want to get too far off the charts here. I'm trying to get to this specific thing, but I do find it interesting here in Revelation 9, verse 7. This part, the locust resembled horses prepared and equipped for battle, and on their heads appeared to be something like crowns, golden crowns, and their faces resembled human faces. They had hair like the hair of women. Their teeth were like the teeth of lions. They had breastplates like breastplates made of iron. And even says the whirring noise of their wings was like the thunderous noise of countless horse-drawn chariots charging at full speed into battle. Well, the one thing with wings that I can think of that sounds like horses in battle would be, something like, well, that. All right, so if you were of that guy and you said, well, kind of like it looks like it has a human face. If this is going, it would look like maybe women's hair, or here's a crown, right? He's got a crown on. It's got breastplate of iron, and it's going to sound like horses. And if I go back here, what does their tail look like? Well, let me kind of look at this. Oh, there we go. Here's a picture of that. Okay. I've got a tail like what? Like a scorpion. They have a long, they have tails like scorpions and stingers. And in their tails is the power to hurt people for 5 months. Is that for sure helicopters? I don't know, but it certainly, certainly is interesting. All right, I'm trying to get to this idea. So we've got a sixth trumpet. They are releasing the four angels bound at the great river Euphrates. I think that is actually at what we would consider the North Pole, one of the four rivers there. Talk about that. Wayne and I talked about that previously. A third of mankind was killed by this. And again, if you consider the idea of, just look at what he's describing here, cavalry, and he's got, again, people riding these horses, but again, he wouldn't have any other word for it. Riders had breastplates the color of fire and hyacinth, sapphire blue, and a brimstone yellow, and the heads of the horses looked like the heads of lion. Okay, so again, it could be something like that, if you've seen from a different angle, something like that, perhaps. But again, what happens? They can have fire and smoke and brimstone coming out of your mouth. Again, that just it's something. Oh, really, Red? That's disgusting, man. I'm so sorry about that. Red just said he got hit with the not streaming thing. Yeah, I'll be careful. All right, so let me. So anyway, here's the other parts that I want to get to. This is really interesting stuff here. In Revelation 10, there's an angel with a little book, right? Oh, let me back up here. I wanted to point this out at the very end here. After the first four trumpets, it says a solitary eagle, and again, some translations say this is a lone angel. So an angel or an eagle, don't know. But they're flying in mid-heaven for all to see, saying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe!" That's 3. Great wrath is coming to those who dwell on the earth because of the remaining blast of the trumpets with the 3 angels who are about to sound. Okay, so we have 3 woes that are coming. All right, so keep that in mind. We got whoa, yeah, like whoa, what is happening? There, it just went crazy. All right, see. Red, I don't know what's going on, man. It's going nutty. Okay, so let's skip to Revelation 9. Okay, we had the bottomless pit. So that was the first woe has passed, right? Behold, 2 woes still coming after this. And then we've got this the 6th trumpet. And you'll notice here, this is very interesting. The 6th trumpet comes, and it says that they kill a third of mankind, right, with this fire and brimstone. And you think, hey, is that the second woe? No. Okay, what? All right, Revelation 10 skips a little bit, and we have another mighty angel coming down from heaven. So this is pretty key right here. He comes down, and he's got clothed in a cloud with a rainbow over his head, and his face like the sun, and his feet and legs were like columns of fire, and he had a little book in his hand. And he says, he shouted with a loud voice, like the roaring of a lion. And when he had shouted, there were 7 thunders that spoke their own voices. And when I started to write it down, I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal it up and don't write it down. So he didn't. But the angel who I'd seen standing on the sea and the land raised his right hand. He swore an oath. And he said, he swore an oath by the name of him who lives forever and ever, who created the heaven and the things in it, the earth and the things in it, and the sea and the things in it, that there would be no more delay. In some translations, it says that there would be no more time. So we have no more time, no more delay, right? The mystery of God. Okay, so it says when it is time for the trumpet call of the 7th angel with the 7th trumpet, then the mystery of God is finished, right? As he announced his gospel to his servants, the prophets. So with the 7th trumpet, that the time is no more and the mystery is finished. It's completed. Okay, so we've got 2 things that are completed. One is the 5th opening of the seal, that when the number of the martyrs is completed, right, then at that point, then he told them to wait until then. And now we have one where it says that at the blowing of the 7th trumpet, to watch when that happens. Then I heard a voice from heaven saying, go get the book from the angel. And so I went to the angel and said, give me the little book. And he said, take and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. So I took the little book from the angel's hand and ate it, and in my mouth it was sweet as honey, but once I'd swallowed it, my stomach was bitter, right? And this just says to me that it's sort of like understanding something. As soon as you get it, you understand it, and it's exciting to know it, but then as soon as you realize what it is, you're like, oh, fuck. It makes you sick at your stomach. That's what I think that's about. Here we have Revelation 11, and this is one that's been a big controversy amongst Christians and Bible scholars for a long time, the 2 witnesses. I've heard everything from the Old and the New Testament to Moses and Elijah to, Enoch and Elijah, because they didn't die. I'm going with, here's my take on it. It just looks like 2 people that behave in the same spirit as both, and the reason Moses and Elijah get called out because of what they do. I grant authority to my 2 witnesses. They'll prophesy for 1,260 days. That's one of the key things. That's 3.5 years. Okay, and it's the same number that's right above it, which is this chapter starts with there's given me a measuring rod like a staff. It says, measure the temple of God and count those who worship in it, but leave out the court of the outer court, right, which is the Gentiles, which is outside the temple, and don't measure it. It's been given to the Gentiles, or the nations, basically Gentiles is not the really word that is used there. It's just the way they translated it, non-Jews or whatever. But don't get too butthurt about that. It's just given to the nations, right? For 42 months. 42 months is still 3.5 years, right? And so we had 3.5 years there. Then the 2 witnesses prophesy for 1,260 days. That's also 3.5 years. So it appears to be the same time. Now, the reason Moses and Elijah come out is because of what they do. It says that they have power to shut up the sky so no rain will fall during the day that they're prophesying. That's Elijah. And they have power to turn the waters into blood. That's Moses. And to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they wish. Right. Also, interestingly enough, it says if anybody tries to harm them, fire comes out of their mouth and devours their enemies. So if anybody wants to harm them, he must be killed in this way. I often thought I read that as just that fire would come out of their mouth, like they would, like they would argue with them, and they would flame them, right? No, you're on fire. But it does say kill. In every translation that I read, including the original Greek, it does indicate kill. So that's an interesting one. But what I want to get to is this. When they finish their testimony and given their evidence, the beast that comes out of the abyss, the bottomless pit, will wage war on them and overcome them and kill them. Their dead bodies lie in the street for 3.5 days. It says here again, it says the great city Jerusalem. I don't think that's it. I'll tell you later in another thing what I think that is and why, because it has symbolic and allegorical names of Sodom and Egypt. I think it's a different place, but I'll explain why. Again, could I be wrong? Absolutely. That's just that's not even the point of what I'm trying to get to here. I'm just telling the story. But here's what happens, right? So the non-believers who live on the earth will gloat over them and rejoice, right? They don't allow their bodies to be laid into a tomb. They just lay out there in the street for 3.5 days, because these two prophets tormented and troubled those who lived on the earth. In every translation, it says they tormented them. They caused such hassle to people that they were so thrilled they sent each other gifts, right? They celebrated. But after 3.5 days, the breath of life from God came into them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear and panic fell on those who watched them. And two witnesses heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they ascended into heaven in the cloud, and their enemies watched them. And in that very hour there was a great earthquake, and the tenth of the city fell and was destroyed, and 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake. Actually, again, in the original Greek it says, and the names of 7,000 men, it's just a weird way to put it, were killed. And the rest who survived were overcome with terror. They were great affright, and they glorified the God of heaven as they recognized his awesome power. Now, here's the second woe. The second woe is past. Below, the third woe is coming quickly. So not a third of mankind being killed. That's not the second woe. These two guys being a pain in the ass to the enemies. That's the second woe. Wow, that's mind-boggling. But now, look what happens. Then immediately the seventh trumpet is the thing. And remember what I said before, what they said was, at the sound of the seventh trumpet, time is no more, and the mystery of God is fulfilled. Okay, so then the seventh angel sounded, and there was loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdom of the world, right, the kingdom, the rule of the world now has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, his chosen one, and he will reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders who sat on their thrones before God fell face downward and worshiped God, saying, to you we give thanks, right? And it goes through all this stuff. And the nations were enraged, and your wrath and indignation finally came. And the time now for the dead to be judged, and the time to reward your servants and the saints and those who fear your name, the small and the great. And time to destroy those who destroyed the earth, the destroyers of the earth. And the temple of God, which was in heaven, was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared, and there were flashes of lightning and a great hailstorm. So at this point, the second woe that's the second woe. These two guys die. And then immediately the seventh trumpet, and it says, okay, now God takes control. The rule, the dominion of the world now passes back from those who took control at the fall that we just, Wayne and I covered. Now it gets back, it goes to Christ, the chosen one, because of this. Now, if we move forward, it says that same thing again. And here's these so now we've got Revelation 12, right? And so many people looked at this, the Revelation 12 sign. The sign appeared in heaven of a woman clothed with the sun and the moon between her feet and a crown of 12 stars. That appeared maybe to have happened recently. So it's an interesting thing. What we do know here is that another sign was seen, a fiery red dragon, right? And he chases this woman. Now, back to the idea of this, what about the rapture. All right. So at this point, we have this. So we have he is here, and we see this woman, and she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth, right? And then the dragon comes, and he chases her down, and he stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour the child. And she gave birth to the son, a male child, who's destined to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And the child was caught up to God on his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God, so she would be nourished there for what? 1,260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years. So this would appear to indicate that now that she's in safety for that period of time, right? So safety for that 3.5 years. So now we've got this next 3.5 year period. Then we've got war broke out in heaven. Michael and his archangel were waging with the war on the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought, but they were not strong enough and did not prevail. And there was no longer a place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the age-old serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. And again, if people want to say that the Bible doesn't say that, here it puts all of them together. The serpent, the devil, and Satan are all the same person, according to Revelation 12. So who continually deceives and seduces the entire inhabited world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. We would consider demons. And then he heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom, the dominion, the reign of our God, and the authority of his Christ have come. So now, for the accuser of our believing brothers and sisters has been thrown down at last. And he who accuses them and keeps bringing charges of sinful behavior. Again, I have said this over and over, that all of the guilt comes from the enemy and not from dad. He's the lawyer is the enemy. He's called the accuser of the brethren. That's the shaitan, the accuser, the adversary. He takes an adversarial role, and he's the one that requires death for sin, not God. Right? He's the one that requires the sacrifice. There must be blood. Right? Blood has to be shed for disobedience, and that's who's asking for it. All right. So, and that is why there was the need for a Savior to begin with, that innocent blood had to be shed because of this demand that blood be shed for sin. All right. So, so therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them, in the presence of God. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you in great wrath, knowing he only has a short time remaining. And when the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who had given birth to the male child. This is often referred to as the church, or those who follow. But the two wings of a great eagle were given to the woman, that she could fly into the wilderness to her place, where she was nourished for a time, time and half a time. There's your 3.5 years again, away from the presence of the serpent. And the serpent hurled water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up the river which the dragon had hurled out of his mouth. So the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went off to wage war on the rest of her children, those who keep and obey the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus, right? Okay, so it appears to me, and this is where I'm getting to the whole rapture thing, that there is what basically a mid-trib protection, and but ultimately there is no, quote, rapture at all. There is the first 3.5 years are very bad, and I'm going to tell you why, because we're going to visit this again, because this is the same story. What you see in Revelation is they tell the story again 2 or 3 times, starting over in just different ways, right? And so we have this the beast from the sea of Revelation 13. But what I want to get to here is this part, that all the inhabitants, so he was, starting with verse 7, he was permitted to wage war against the saints, God's people, and overcome them, and with authority and power over every tribe and people and language and nation. All the inhabitants of the earth will fall down and worship him, everyone whose name had not been written since the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb, who had been slain, the willing sacrifice. And if anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, he will go into captivity. And if anyone is to be killed with a sword, he must be killed with a sword. And here is a call for patient endurance and the faithfulness of the saints, which is, so again, let's look at this in any translation that you want. It basically says, if anyone is to go into captivity, they're going to go into captivity. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. And so I don't think that speaks at all of a rapture where people escape any sort of trouble. It says explicitly that that's going to happen. Now, I'll continue to go. Right, and because we also have here, this is the number by the mark of the beast here. There's a mark that you have to have in your right hand or your forehead. Calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. That number is 666. But I want you to pay particular attention to Revelation 13, 7 through 10, especially 10. If anyone goes into captivity they will go. If anyone's to be killed with the sword they will be killed. All right, Revelation 14, we have again that 144,000, so it goes back to that. This is why I think that, again, it's telling these stories in different ways, right? And is now this tells about the fallen of Babylon, but fear God and give it, because the hour of its judgment has come, right? So now we get to this part, and it says specifically what happens to those who accept the mark of the beast, right? And that's a bad thing. But he goes to this story here, and that there is the harvesting of the earth. Let me go back up here. I want to get to this other thing. Let's see, Revelation 15, 7 angels with 7 plagues. They're going to throw out the last 7 plagues there, but there's another one I want to point out here. It's interesting here because the last plagues are really awful, but people hardened their hearts. And let's see here. But it says one more time. I want to just kind of, I think it is it in 17 or 19, where it does, it says the same thing again. And again, I'll give you, I can do a later thing on what I think the 17, 18, and 19 is with Babylon and who and what that is. It would just take too much time to get into it now. I'm just trying to answer this one question. I've already gone way too long on doing this. Here we have the beast again with 7 heads and 10 horns. This calls for mind with wisdom. They explain what it is, but where I wanted to get is that until God's words are fulfilled, He continues to say this. That remember there was that no more time at that point, right? So here we have the crushing of Babylon and all, what happens there. And I hope I'm not missing the part here, because there's a specific, here this is Revelation 18, right at the very end. In her was found, so it says, your merchants were the world's important people. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of the prophets and of God's holy people, of all who had been slaughtered on the earth. Again, that doesn't sound like you're getting off scot-free in a rapture. So then we have he condemned the prostitute, or the woman riding the beast. So here we have the great multitude again, and when I want to get this one right here. So the angel said to me, write this: blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. Okay, good. He said the other one here, I think, was it? No, it's, I think, maybe 20, where it says specifically that looking here real quickly, maybe it's 21 or 22. No more death, but I want to get to, so maybe I had missed it. Maybe I have to do a search for it, because it says specifically, oh God, you just did that to me again. Stop it. So maybe I did. So this is describing the New Jerusalem. So I wanted to come back. There is one place where it basically says, maybe it's 17 and I missed it, where it says specifically, so I'm sorry. I should know this by the back of my hand, but is it right here? No, maybe it is 17. Okay, I just have to, so here, oh boy. So maybe I'll have to start at 15. So basically what it says, and I don't know why I missed it, it is kind of right in the middle there. So I thought it was 17, but maybe it was, so I just thought it was 17, and I don't know why I'm missing it here. Basically, yes, okay, that looks right. Wow, I don't see it there. I'm sort of missing it, because maybe it was early, maybe it was 14. I don't know. So basically, it's right about that same time, and it says, is it right after that? Because Okay, so this is the Revelation 13:10, where it says, if anybody's going to go into captivity, they'll go into captivity. If anybody is going to go to the sword, they'll go to the sword. And it is, maybe it's 14, it's right after that. It says, again, we see this thing. It says this calls for patient endurance, and this is right after it talks about what happens to those who have the mark of the beast. And so again, we see this phrase. It said this calls for patient endurance. This is what I'm looking for right here. It is 14, 14, 13. Blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them. Okay, all that, I was trying to get to that. So many translations. So basically what, what I I've come to on that, again, it's helpful to read all of them and to look at the original Greek and understand that. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get to is this, that it does appear from the way that I read this is that during that period of, what you would say the tribulation or whatever, that many are going to perish, and it is until that number is filled. And as soon as that number is filled, which may be the two witnesses of Revelation 11, might be the last of those, right? In the middle, they prophesy for 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years. So it may be that the first 3.5 years, and it says that they are given into, the saints are given into their hand. So it may be that they do, it says that anybody who doesn't take the mark of the beast should be killed. So, and that's very explicitly said, right? That if it says here, that it forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark. And it said basically anybody that doesn't worship them is given power to give breath to the image of the first beast. I think it is perhaps here again in 14, where it says that if anybody worships the beast there, so they basically anybody that does not worship the beast is they're going to put them to death, right? So here's all I'm trying to get to, right? All that time to get here. Basically, the idea is that for that first 3.5 years of tribulation, and what Jesus said, if it was so bad that if no one would survive, no flesh would survive if he didn't cut that time short. So the way I'm reading it right now is that that the first 3.5 years, during which there are these things going on, and the second woe, which is these two people, whatever, creating havoc, wreaking havoc with the system, and calling down all kinds of bad stuff. So that people were so happy that they were dead that they sent each other gifts. So there you go. But immediately thereafter is the seventh trumpet, and it said right at the end of the seventh trumpet, that's when their time will be no more, and when God takes back control of the earth. So that's what that's kind of where I'm reading it right now. So in terms of a rapture, I don't think so. I think the best that's going to happen is the middle of Revelation 13. It says that the woman was given, wings of an eagle, where she was taken to the wilderness, and she's fed out of the reach of the dragon for 3.5 years. So I think in the middle, maybe there's no more. That's just how I'm reading it right now. Okay. So there you go. All this craziness. So hey, I'm glad you appreciate it. I hope it made some sense. So I was trying to get to the idea of what that looks like. Here's my thing about the rapture. Right? Is that would be super great, right? If there was a rapture and everybody got to avoid any sort of problem. But that's not my experience with Dad. It is through struggle and challenge that my commitment to him grows. If it is too easy, then people don't appreciate what doesn't cost. And as a result, I mean, this is exactly, if you want to look at the movie The Matrix, right? Agent Smith tells Morpheus that the first iteration of The Matrix was a paradise, and people rejected it because they did not, rapture is Mandela effect. I think it's rupture, right? That's what I think it is a rupture of many people's, you want to say faith, right? They believe that they are going to escape this. And when they don't, and then they're faced with, just like we're seeing now, right? That you can't go into the store without a mask, or you can't carry on business. If you are forced to take the vaccine or a microchip, right, that says you can't buy or sell without it, carry on business, and so you can't buy or sell, and you're going to get killed if you don't have it. Most people are going to do that. And it says this requires patience of the saints, and it also says that if anybody's going to go to the sword, they're going to go to the sword. If anybody's going to be captured, they'll be captured. That's my position right now. And yeah, Nicaeus, that's Ezekiel 33, the watcher on the wall, exactly. So so that's my take, right? And in my mind, and I've said this recently, you're going to threaten me with death, right? At this point, I'm like, don't threaten me with a good time, right? Like I'm so done. Again, I'm not looking to punch my own ticket or anything, but given the choice between staying here in this crappy place and moving on to the next event, don't threaten me with a good time. Come on, man. So anyway, that's my personal take. So that's a long-winded view going into a look at Revelation of why I don't see a rapture, and I do see the potential for again those who are faithful to the Creator and who say no to the plans of the enemy and wanting to set up this world of New World Order, whatever they want to call it, that it may look, and again, I've heard several people now say that they have a good deal of hope, right? That we're going to win. The good guys win and the bad guys fail. Man, I would love to see that. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm saying I don't see it that way. I am most concerned that they do something where they throw a bunch of their own under the bus. So it makes it look like they've weeded out all the baddies and now there's something new that we should all be happy about. That's my biggest concern, because I think many people will fall for that trick, that it seems as if what they'll do is to burn a few of their own. They'll take some of these, quote elite, but these pedo people out, and all the Q people would certainly be happy, right? They'd feel vindicated. But I think many people within the truth community, and they'd say the Great Awakening, they would say, "See, we won, we stopped it," and now there's going to be something new afterwards. And I'm going to say, just like with defunding the police, if that gets you excited, keep in mind that what comes afterwards is most likely to be much, much worse. So I don't know. Maybe I'm overly skeptical, right? But when I follow along with what I read in the book of Revelation, I'm good with the way that it turns out, because good does win ultimately. Love wins, and the enemy loses. It's just not here, right? It's just not within the system. And I have long said that the system isn't broken; it's fixed, right? It's made to be this way, and so you cannot change the system to be a good thing, because it's just not. So was there actually 30,000 pedos arrested during Germany? I mean, I don't have any proof of this. I'd love to think that. And even if there were, again, would it just be some of the low levels? Would it just be a ruse, right? So think about the truth traps that we've seen, right? This Wayfair thing, doesn't that strike you as kind of like odd? So here's one thing I've learned, right, is that if it's touted in the mainstream media, they've got an agenda to it, right? So if we really did catch Wayfair trafficking children, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that they weren't, okay, so, but let's say if we caught them, red-handed, and they're trying to cover it up, the media would fucking cover it up like they do every time, right? They went right after, like, oh, Pizzagate? No, that's nothing. That's a it's nonsense. It's conspiracy theory, right? Even though the evidence kind of was there. But here they're kind of doing the same thing. But if it makes the mainstream media, if it becomes 24/7 news, they got an agenda. They got it owned. They're owning that. The stuff that's really happening, you don't hear about. So this is what I see over and over and over. This is the thumbprint. They're not very inventive, and it seems like they don't have to be. People fall for the same stuff. Exactly. Why would we be taking out pre-trib when we needed the most? Again, I just as far as I can tell, Brandon, the idea of a pre-trib rapture didn't even appear until the very late 1800s by one guy. And I mean, it's one of those things, sort of like I think Q, that people would love to believe that. It sounds great. It sounds really great. Oh, we get to escape all this and we don't have to go through it. Awesome. Sign me the fuck up. I'm down with that shit. So I mean, that it would be great. I just don't see it, and that's not what the story says that I just read. Right? If you read all of the 22 chapters of Revelation, and the 9 important chapters of Daniel, that's not what it says. And if you put any value into what the Bible and other scriptures and prophecies say, and again, you just make what you want of prophecies. I'm not telling you gotta buy into it. I'm just saying that this is the way I'm reading it, and there seems to be, to me, a lot of evidence that would suggest that, that there is something solid here. It does seem that they're following the script, everybody, so I would love to watch the House of Cards collapse too. I would love it. I don't think that's going to be how it goes. Now, again, it may appear that way at one thing. And again, this would be my take. To me, I've always said the most dangerous thing is you get some external force, right? Like, let's say here come the good aliens and they're going to help us, and they take out all these bad humans, and but we have to worship them, right? And they're going to fight the bad aliens, quote, quote, which would actually be the good guys, which would be, the return of Dad and his guys. And that's the only way that I could see, because toward the end of Revelation, it explicitly says that the enemy gets all of mankind to come and fight against God when he shows up. I'm like, how do you do that? How do you convince people to fight against God? And the easiest way that I can see is, again, you paint it within the narrative of aliens. And so you present the bad guys as good, friendly aliens, and the good guys as the bad aliens, and you're going to fight against them because they're coming to fight. So, I mean, again, that's how I'm seeing it right now. Honestly, guys, I have no fucking idea, right? When it comes down to it, I can't make any solid claims. But I'm saying, insofar as I read it right now, this is what makes the most sense to me. But what I do read here is in question to that, to that whole rapture narrative. I just go no, and also possibly a fake rapture, right? That could be an entirely controlled narrative because of all the programs that I've seen. I mean, the missing and the returned and the 300, and there have been, oh my God, 11 or 12 shows on Netflix and different movies that indicate that people disappear and then they come back with either like supernatural powers, even in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right? You've got the people that came back with the aliens that had been, that had been abducted over time, and they came back. So anyway, that's the scoop. There is that it very well could be a fake event to appear as though there's a rapture that is set up by by the cabal. I don't know. That's a possibility because I've seen so many predictive programming indications of it. So that's a possibility. All right. So now with all that, see if I can get to any other questions before we duck out here. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. It's always a pleasure, and I love the time we spend together. I feel kind of weird just babbling on myself, but scrolling back up here. King James Version, again, some argue that that's the only version. Some argue that, King James was a Mason, and I don't think that, again, matters as much. My take on it is that there is much of it in Scripture that appears to be fairly solid because it's not the initial extant source. The English is not the extant source. You can go back further than that. However, there does seem to be some places that were altered in some way that appears to be at the hands of the Jesuits via the Benedictines. So again, if I were trying to make it, to discredit it, I would do, it's the truther trap, right? You put some truth there, but you put some falsehoods, and then you point out the falsehoods and say it's all false. So you'd keep it as intact as possible, and then, but put just enough poison in it, right? 3 drops of poison poisons a whole gallon of water. So that's all you got to do to get people to discredit it, is simply to put some stuff in there that you can discredit and go, see, it's nonsense. And that's easy enough to do. So, but I think much of it does again, it is consistent with, here again, my biggest takeaway from Scripture has been this, that it is an invitation. It is a description of people who had an extraordinary experience with a supernatural being that fucked them up so bad that they went to extraordinary lengths to make a record of it. But in many cases, they often were mistaken or had misapprehensions about the intentions of the Creator, because we are not Him, and He is way bigger than us. And so, the best way to get to understand it is to know Him. That's been my experience, is that I better understand these things in the context of my relationship with Dad. And so the whole thing is an invitation. It's a love letter, and it helps us understand where we are, the history that happened before us, the context that we were born into a battle, born into a war that is not, we didn't start, but we are here, and that's the nature of it, and that you must choose a side, and this is the context. And then after that, it is really up to you to make your own decisions. And again, I encourage everybody to reach out and talk to the Creator yourself and see what He has to say. I don't think it has to be done in the context of a religion. I think that's actually a bad place to do it. But I think there are, certain tenets, quote, of Christian faith that make sense and are consistent with what the Bible says. But there are things other than the Bible that say similar things that contain truth. So for what it's worth, I always say, eat the meat and throw away the bones. Ultimately, it's between you and Dad. That's my whole thing, is that it's not up to me to decide what is right and wrong. It is up to Dad, and all I can do is to maintain my relationship with Him and do the best I can with what He gives me and what He tells me personally. And most of that is leave other people the fuck alone, right? You're not in a position to judge them. So you're messed up, dude, and so you got to work on you. And so I spend most of my time working on me and trying to be a better representation of love. And ultimately, this comes down to when I began this awakening project. Frankly, I fell in love with these people who sent me these letters and of their awakening process, and how lonely they are, being isolated from others, and it just made me want to spend time with them. And so here we are, and here you are, and so thank you for being here. And that's what I want to say. So if there's any other questions. Yeah, right. Lacey Mariposa says, I feel similar about don't threaten me with a good time regarding martyrdom, but terrified to leave their babies on their own in this mortal plane. Again, I would say trust Dad with that. He knows. And, I'm hesitant to give advice, right? Because it's not my decision to make. I mean, I could tell you what I would do, but that's me. And I can't say that that's right for you. I mean, my thing is I want to teach my kids, to know Dad as well, and so they can make their own decision with that. Am I single? No, I have a beautiful bride, and she's awesome. But I do love people, and I love to spend time with them, and I love to get to know people, and I love people who have differing views than me. My wife has some, differing views, and she doesn't see everything the same way I do, but we give each other a lot of space, and we don't drag on each other for not seeing things the same way. We have different experiences, and so similarly, I have different experiences than other people, and so I understand that. I've had my experience, and so you can't talk me out of it, right? You can't change my mind because I've had these experiences and I see those things that I see. But I'm open-minded to see things differently, and that I could be wrong about certain things. But experience is what I have, right? That those experiences are real. She is, but she's very shy. She has social anxiety, so you are unlikely to get to meet her in this context. Although I've been trying. She has a beautiful singing voice, and I've been trying to get her to join me in some music or something like that. I tried to get her early on before I ever did a podcast. We often have conversations that are so funny, and she's so bright and clever and witty, and we had talked for hours about how to fix things and change things. And we would go back and forth on how to do it politically, or how to ultimately do things. And I was like, we could do a podcast, right? It would be well listened to. And she's like, oh my God, I would just throw up. I can't even think of it. And I'm like, well, I could hide a microphone, right? And we just had a conversation. As long as you didn't think about anybody being on the other side. Don't think about them, right? Just have the conversation with me. But yeah, that's yeah, we'll see. I've hinted at time to time because she has a lot of really interesting things to say, and we love talking to each other. And again, I mind my time well, also, so that I spend time with you because I care about you, but I spend time. I'm mindful to spend my time with her as well because I do genuinely, we like each other, right? So okay. Yes, that is funny. Let's see, what else we got here? If anything, do they expect to win? Here's what I think. It depends on who you mean by they. I think the humans do. I think that those who are what we would call elites and those who are in the brotherhood, right? I think they do. I think that they have been deceived, and they believe that they're going to get immortality. You're right. I could do that. That would be sneaky. I probably wouldn't like that. I would get her permission, though. Yes, I would have to get her approval before airing because she would know that she was a rock star because she is. I would love that, Janet. I've been trying to figure that one out, too, because she does have an amazing, beautiful singing voice. She was very involved in singing when she was younger. So yeah, how chaotic do I think November will be? I think actually November is I think it might be September, but I think for some reason November sticks in my head. I don't know. I hate making prognostications. I hate making predictions because, you just don't want to be, don't want to be wrong. I mean, it'd be great if I knocked it out of the park. Go November 11th, November 13th, November 9th, 11/9, 9/11. There you go. It's 11/9. Even a blind squirrel gets a nut every now and then, right? I just think in the fall, they love that shit, right? They love their numbers. They love their occult rituals. I don't think that this year will end without there being something else happen. That just seems because they're playing it. They're playing us on that, right? About how 2020 is this and that, and but I think here's the thing is that they will get a certain immortality that they don't want, and that I think is the threat. When I read the end of Revelation, right? So I've always looked at, for example, I never went with the idea of there being an eternal hell. It doesn't seem to be that way because, again, what Jesus said was that there was the second death. Don't be afraid of those who can kill the body, but he who can kill the body and the soul in hell, right? And the idea of there being a second death, that those who had been judged unworthy would be ended. They would simply end, except when I read it again, those who took the mark of the beast, right? Those people get a kind of immortality. And what happens is, it's my reading of it, is when he makes everything new, there is no place for them to be. They go into an emptiness zone. And so that is torture, that they are immortal, in the sense that they cannot be, their soul can't be killed because they took this mark. They somehow got, I think it is probable that their DNA gets altered such that they are combined with the DNA, if you will, of these interdimensional beings. And so it gives them a kind of immortality, but it's not the kind of immortality that they want. It's right before the end. And so what's the goal? I think the goal of the dark ones, the actual follower, the actual immortals that follow Lucifer and on that team, they know what their end is, and they always have. So they know what is going to happen. But their plan, as it always has been, is to hurt Dad as badly as possible. And in doing so, just like a jilted lover, right? I'm going to hurt you as badly as I can. And I know, right, Dawn? There goes the short show. So that the point is because he loves his children and those who he made to be in his image, he loves us. And so to get back at Dad for their punishment, punishment, again, I see it less as punishment as the result of their decision. And when you unplug from the power source, it is not punishment to go dark, right? You separate yourself from perfection, then death is the ultimate end of that. So But that being the result, they see it again as their punishment. They're going to take as many as they can, and it's a numbers game to them, right? So they're going to try to deceive as many as they can to suffering that fate, and to keep as many as they can from the waiting arms of God as He comes to take back what He gave to us. And I think, again, from what I described before, that there is a certain number of those who will be martyred over time. And once that number is filled, it's like, okay, enough is enough. You've now done it, right? You done pissed in your chili. And because He didn't give them the choice, right? And so there's the karmic, the karmic shrug that finally comes back around to haunt you. That's what it looks like to me. Again, I don't make any claims of being absolutely right. I'm not, trying to be a teacher here or anything. That's not my point. I'm just trying to share the way I see it. But I've spent a lot of time in study, and I do spend a great deal of attention with my relationship with Dad, and I like to share that with people because I think that they can find both wisdom and comfort there. I know I have, right? So I encourage other people for that, but I'm not trying to convert or convince anybody. That's not my point. Anyway, so that is... that's what I got. Thank you for reminding me, Dawn, that I was supposed to make a short show out of this. But I did say I would answer questions as best I could, and one of them was something that I haven't touched on before, but I kind of wanted to warn people about, which is the idea of there being a rapture, that they're going to get out of it. I think that is a very dangerous idea, because if you expect that to come and it doesn't, then what? Right? You will, all the things you thought you believed are now gone. And you think that you've been abandoned. And that's just not how it is, right? I don't think there's any abandonment there. Even if you have to walk into your own death, right? You're not being abandoned, right? Again, from my perspective, I say, don't threaten me with a good time. I'm done, right? I've had plenty. I've had plenty of what this world has to offer. I've had a really good life. I've enjoyed a great deal of it. I've had some hard times as well, but I have learned to love, and I've learned what that is and where we are, and that I prefer being with Dad. And so ultimately, like Paul said, to live is good, to die is better. So anyway, that's what I got for you. If there's anything else you guys want to ask or comment before we go. Life is a garden, dig it, right? Exactly. So all these things here's, I guess, if I wanted to leave you with something, is don't be afraid, right? Even if this all sounds scary, right? For me, it is not. It is exciting, actually. That we get to, if it is true that we're going into the final turn, then how great is that, right? We actually get to see some comeuppance happen, and we actually get to see this thing occur. So freaking exciting, delightful. Again, not without difficulty, certainly, but nothing worth having is without difficulty. So yeah, I'm exactly. The only thing I would fear is separation from Dad. That's it, right? And so everything that I set my mind on is to want to be in closer relationship and a better conduit for that. So that's where I'm at. But I would just encourage you to do not be afraid, right? If you find yourself in the arms of the Creator, I know Him. I know them to be good and trustworthy. Now, I can't convince you of that. You're going to have to find out for yourself in your relationship with them. The same way you would have to find that out in a relationship with someone that you loved, and that over time you would find them to be trustworthy. But my experience is very trustworthy, the most, right? And the very definition of love. And I can trust them, such that I can say explicitly, like it says in the book of Job, though he slay me, yet I will trust in him. Right? He's good. So with that, again, I'm more than ready. And so I don't think these things should be fearful. Right? If you have love in your heart, the opposite of love is fear. And God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. Right? So perfect love casts out fear. Don't be afraid. These things may be concerning, certainly, and I think concern is an appropriate response, to be watchful, right? And that it is dangerous. It is not going to be easy, but this is why I encourage people to make your decision now of where your line in the sand is and defend it, right? So, again, if you got more questions, I'll try to do my best to hit that. Otherwise, yeah, exactly. You just pray daily. I encourage that. If you want to call it prayer, communion, meditation, spend time with your Creator. My experience is that is the best possible way that you can spend your time. Everyone dies, but not everyone really lives. If you're wondering, I'm just taking a few drags off a cigarette there. It's one of my last vices. So I'm trying to quit. Joe beat me. Joe Ray is in the chat, and he beat me. We both smoked for a long time. He's been 5, 6, 7 years now, Joe. Good for you. But I gotta drop it. I don't want to have an addiction to anything. I don't want anything to have control over me, right, anymore. So there's that. With that, guys, thank you very much for coming along. Yeah, exactly. Fearful, no. Vigilant and mindful. Yes, absolutely. 100%. Those are well put. That's exactly the way I would say it. But you did, so I didn't have to. All right, kids. Thank you very much again for coming along. This is always a beautiful time for me to spend time with you, and thanks for letting me share my thoughts on that. I'm happy to try to, if it's unclear what I kind of went through, happy to try to express that. There's a whole lot that I didn't touch on. The Book of Revelation has certainly been something that people have struggled with for a very long time, as do I continually. I still find it. There are parts I still don't get, right? But overall, the more I look at it, the more things kind of congeal a little bit, and I get a little bit better feel for it. So I think what will happen is that when it occurs, and the same with Daniel, when it actually happens, we'll see it really clearly, right? We'll go, oh yeah, oh of course. So there. Okay, so Enlightened Dawn. 5.5 years, Joe. Awesome. So we'll just we'll lift each other and support each other, right? We'll just say, hey, good for you. So I'll give you updates on how I'm doing with that. I just don't want to be addicted to anything. Coffee, I love coffee. I got all those enes, right? I got nicotine, caffeine, heroin, methamphetamine. No, I'm kidding. That's methamphetamines, but. Anyway, caffeine, man. She's been having some issues with gut stuff, and wife says maybe it's because the fat. We use heavy cream in our coffee, and I'm like, oh, I can't give up my coffee, man. It's too good. We'll see about that, but I know I love cigarette with a coffee. Oh, coffee and cigarettes. So it's part of the brown food group, right, Janet? Have some steak. Right, and then some chocolate and coffee and a cigarette. That's the brown food group. That's the good stuff, man. It's barely coffee. It's coffee with a skirt on it, isn't it, Red? Right, the way I make the coffee. No, it's pretty delicious. Yeah, when you have it, you'll be like, holy shit! It is so good, it makes you swear. Everybody who's ever had it that likes coffee anyway is like, oh man. So we got that going, which is nice. So. Coffee, I don't know, man. The cream isn't pasteurized. Well, I can't get unpasteurized cream. If I could, I'd be all over that shit. They say you have to wean yourself off. That's how I did it before. I have successfully quit smoking before 3 or 4 times. Mark Twain says it's easy. I've done it lots of times, but yeah. Hey, thank you. I love you guys too. No, seriously. I mean, I'm not just saying that. It's been a delight getting to know you folks, and it's such a great group. Just one last thing I'll throw out there. If you know Rose 777 and Jason Lindgren, maybe you know what's going on with them. That they had they bought a house, and Rose is in a wheelchair, and so they needed to make some modifications and remodeling on the house to accommodate that. And what occurred? They gave quite a bit of money to a contractor to come in and do that. They tore the place up and then disappeared with the money, and also took some of Jason's guitars and other musical equipment. So they're going to try to deal with that. But in the interim, Rose is kind of stuck in needing a lot of, the house isn't letting her, do her things, and she has to rely really heavily on Jason, and she feels like, burden. And I mean, I know exactly how that is. So we're just trying to get a place. So she has to go to California for 5 days between the 20th and the 25th, and she'll return on the 25th to the New Orleans area. They live in Covington area of Louisiana. So we're trying to come up with a little chump change to get her a place to stay for a couple of weeks. Maybe like a vacation rental that's appropriate, or maybe like an extended stay America, or that type of thing that's ADA approved. I've already gotten about 150 plus bucks or something like that people have donated to me to give to her. You can also donate directly to them. That works too, but I'd love to be able to really throw down and really help them out. So you can email me. I'll put it in the chat here. It's unintended.consequences3@gmail.com. I know Rose has been awesome about it. She hasn't complained. I mean, she's like, she's told me how she feels about it, but she hasn't complained or bitched about it. I just want to help her. They helped me, when I needed it, and they're just they're really, really good people, and I just want to help them. So there's that. You can hit me at paypal.me/greatbaldini, and I will pass it along to them. I'm not taking anything for that. I just want to help them. Or you can send it directly to them. I don't know Rose's PayPal at the top of my head, but you can find it certainly at Rose 777 channel, or if you come to the Poppycock Report Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 6 a.m. Pacific and 9 a.m. Eastern, she puts it in there as well. So anyway, you couldn't hear. Well, sorry. I try to be heard. Anyway, want to just basically help them out in any way possible. I also have a Venmo account that you can hit that. I think it's. I'll put that in the channel description later as well. But yeah, they're really good people. So if we can help them out, the deadline, is going to be around that 21st, so we can make sure it happens by the 25th. But anyway, if you want to help out, hit us up, and we'd like to be able to do something good for them, because they've done such good things in the community. And if you can, if you have a channel and you can make a mention about it, or some, because I mean, I don't have a lot of subscribers, 1,000 or so, 1,200 maybe, I don't know. It's not about that for me. I want the right people. But if you know how to pass it along or get it to a bigger audience, please do that, because I just want to do good for them. Anyway, thanks guys Singe, what happened to them? Just briefly again, they bought a house, or got a good deal on a house, and they're going to put a studio in and that sort of stuff. Well, Rose is, as you know, she's in a wheelchair. She had a stroke a number of years ago, and she is in a wheelchair, and so they needed to have some modifications and remodeling done to allow for that, to make it appropriate. Well, they gave about $10,000-$11,000 to a contractor who came and tore the place apart, and then ran off with the money, and then wouldn't return. He ghosted them, and so they're trying to, and then stole some of Jason's guitars and other equipment. So they're going to deal with that and through the legal process. But Rose, in the interim, is kind of stuck, and that the house is torn apart, and she's wheelchair bound, and so she needs the standard stuff: bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, so she can function. And they have kind of different schedules. Rose gets up very early, and Jason gets up like a musician in the afternoon, and so it's a difficult situation. So again, we just Rose has to go to California for a few days to do some medical stuff, and then coming back, we just like to give her a little time as Jason tries to get the place fixed up at least enough that she can function there. So that's what we're trying to do, is thanks, Janet. Anyway, we're again, a possibility is maybe having somebody come stay with them through that period of time as well. We can pay maybe somebody to come in and give her give her some help so that Jason doesn't have to, because they have to keep. They're both very busy people, obviously, and doing their streams and doing the work with Crow, which has now gone to three shows a week. So anyway, just keep that in mind and keep them in your thoughts and prayers. They've made it a mockery in the modern society, thoughts and prayers, but I think it's the most powerful thing that you can do. So if you if you can contribute in some way, or if you have any ideas and you want to contact me or reach out for that about ways that we might be able to bless them, that's awesome too. Again, I know that financially what we're trying to do is just get a place for her to stay for maybe a couple of weeks. I'd like to do a month if possible. 21 days at Extended Stay America in the New Orleans area was just about $1,200. I think by the time we did taxes and everything, it was right at $1,000, and I think it's about $1,200. So that would be 21 days. That'd be awesome. But even if we can get a couple of weeks, like I said, right now, just sitting on, just less than a couple $100. I don't know exactly what she's gotten sent to her. I hope it's much more than what's been sent to me. But I've been, like I said, trying to put the word out and make that happen for them. And I'm doing some side work to try to get a few extra resources to send to them as well. So again, if it's in your heart to do that, there's that. So if you can, Janet, that'd be awesome. Just send me an email if you would, and let me get the contact information to Rose, and maybe you guys can, talk and work something out. I have a very tight schedule as well, and so there's a limited time of what I can do. I did start to look for some rental places and stuff, and some of them weren't as appropriate as they claimed, and so I'm kind of going back and forth with Rose and trying to do that. But she has been really good about not, she doesn't want to, obviously, like I don't, beg for money or anything like that. She doesn't. That's not how she is. But she's willing to accept it because she needs it. So she is an awesome, awesome person, as are you guys. This is the finest group of people I have ever been continuously in contact with in my life. So everyone from Sue Finelli and Dawn and Bob and Cammie Nadell and everybody, Billingtano and Chiquita. I know I'm forgetting everybody, but all you guys that come, Nemo, and he's doing his upside down and backwards podcast individually to people, which is fantastic. Red Fox, all you guys that come and hang out, and we just group together and become part of this community. Thank you so much. And again, I appreciate, I know 3.6 subs, right? So I got like 1.2, so she got like 3 times what I got, because she's way better. She got 777. I don't even have any numbers. Anyway, thanks so much, guys, for being here. And again, if you're able to help and you come up with some ideas, let me know. Anyway, with that, I am going to skedaddle. And I appreciate, again, you guys and the time we spent together. Just remind you again, if you want, just join Rose and I Tuesday and Thursday mornings on the Rose 777 channel for the Poppycock Report, where we just take an amusing look at the lies they tell. We take a look at all the poppycock going on. That's Tuesday and Thursday morning at Rose 777 channel. And that's at 6 a.m. Pacific, very early on the West Coast, and 9 a.m. Eastern time. And then I'm often a guest on Wednesday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific and 9 p.m. Eastern on Secrets of Saturn channel with Jason Lindgren, Wayne McCroy. And then I do the Unintended Consequences on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. And then I'll do Ancient Wisdom for a Modern World Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Central. And then again, this show, which is Sola Scriptura, every other week with Wayne McCroy for the full episodes. And then the 0.5 episodes like this one, where we just kind of chat at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. So have a great evening, and we'll see you again soon.